Right, we're about to start our expert webinar on personal development and looking at some career paths, some options and skills development. People are just joining us now, so if you'd like to say hi and introduce yourself in the chat room, tell us where you are. And that's just before we get started. And then in a few moments, when everybody's arrived, we'll start off on our webinar on personal development. So welcome. Today, our experts will be discussing personal development, their own personal development journeys, the twists and turns, how they got to be where they are now, but also looking at skills gaps. What skills do our members need? What can they work on for their own future development? And also importantly, how leaders can help their teams reach their full potential. Our IFOL experts deliver virtual masterclasses every month. We'll be providing you with a best practice guide following the session, so no need to make any notes. Please put any questions you might have in the chat and we'll do our best to pick them up and address them. And we'll also be running a couple of polls. We'd be grateful if you could join in with those and vote. I'm Sue Beardsmore, and today with us we have Gary Stevens. He's been involved in finance in the private and public sector for over 40 years. He transformed the Accounts Payable team at Aberdeen City Council, and he works with organisations to strengthen AP teams and overall performance. His work involves culture change, new skills development for individuals, teams and whole organisations. Dan Allen is the People Business Partner for the Trading and Commercial Divisions of Canby Group, which provides sports betting services. He's been in learning and development for 6 years, most recently as Global Learning and Development Manager with Canby. And a significant focus of his work has been the development of managers and leaders at all levels, helping existing and aspiring managers build their confidence by giving them the tools to work with. So welcome, Gary, Dan, good to have you.
Hi.
Now we're going to kick off with a poll to focus our minds. So everybody, do you have a career plan in place? Yes, no, or unsure? So yes, no, or unsure. It's just a single choice and we'll leave that one brewing. Oh, we haven't got a career plan in place, so there's plenty to talk about. Let's set off. But first of all, let's hear about how you got where you are, your own stories. What's your experience of career planning personally and for others, of course. So let's start a brief overview and how planned your career moves have been. Let's kick off with Dan. Can you run us through what's happened to you, Dan, briefly?
Yes, a snapshot of my career. My background originally, when I first started in my long-term career, was in retail operations. So I was a deputy store manager for B&Q, and I got asked a really great question, and this is going to be quite a good theme for us going forward around leaders and how much of an impact they have. I had a fantastic regional manager who asked me the simple question: what do you want to be famous for? When you leave a branch or you start a new store, what do you want your brand to be? And the brand that I wanted to be was a people developer. So someone that really develops people, helps them reach their full potential. And as I was having conversations internally, I was like, well, why didn't I do that for a career? And learning development seemed like the best route to do that. And I was very lucky to, again, with serendipity we spoke about a little while before the call, got asked to was on a learning session in our store team, and just asked the facilitator, how do I get a job in learning development at B&Q? And that was kind of how my career kicked off. And it was very much me being proactive and going after that learning development job, being successful, being very green and novice and having not really much clue of what to do. A majority of my development has been on the job. It's been through great experiences that I've been given and provided by the people that I've worked with, and working with fantastic people that helped and mentored and coached me internally within the team. And since going into learning development, the majority of my career has been looking at opportunities and just going after things that I maybe not was quite qualified for, maybe was a little bit of a stretch and a reach. But with, again, goal in mind of once being in learning development for a short period of time, wanting to do a much bigger, much broader and much more generalist role. So my career moves and my career decisions have been trying to lead me into that more strategic role with learning development, and now looking at the people partner role to get into more generalist. My ultimate aim is that SVP of people and culture. So that's kind of how my development's gone. And I've been really lucky in my current role to have a fantastic leader that is interested in my career, and one of the first conversations we had when he joined the business was, you know, where do you see yourself in a couple of years' time? And sometimes as a leader, that's the only question you need to ask to really kick off those conversations. So my career has very much been grasping opportunities when they come, but also putting in the work that I know which career direction I want to go in. So putting in the work and getting opportunities that help me get to that place.
Okay, so that's sort of the plan, is to go after what you want and look for what there might be out there, rather than I've got to do this by then, or this by then, or this by then. It's as the things come up, you react to them, but you know what you're looking for overall. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. It's the end goal in mind. I think that's the really key thing, is to have an end goal in mind of where you want to be. But, you know, if I went back to my end goal back in 2012, I wanted to be a divisional director for Asda when I was working there. So things can change, things can evolve. And I say I'll always go back to that one question I got asked: what do you want to be famous for? And that can change someone's career direction for the better in my case. So I think having an end goal in mind, but being reactive to opportunities that come up for you are so important. And yeah, nothing is off limits, I think, is the way I describe my career, and the way I describe how I approach things.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Dan. So Gary, run us through your career and some of the plans and some of the things that maybe just happened.
How long have we got, sir?
Well, that's right. I'm going to say a brief run through your career.
My career path is a bit longer than Dan's. I started in my working life back in 1978 as a lowly stock control clerk for a scaffolding company. And let's not say that wasn't where I wanted to be for the rest of my career. So about 4 years later, and I think Dan touched on it, I applied for a post which was as a credit controller in a finance company. And I wanted to stretch myself, and it was a job that really appealed to me. And I did have some qualifications from school that helped me meet the criteria that they were looking for. Unfortunately, I was able to get that role and started working down south in Bristol. I live up in Scotland now. So I started working in that job, and that really got me involved in finance. And that was an area that I really enjoyed being in. There was lots of different areas that you could get involved in. So I was quite happy there for a number of years, but then decided I wanted to move back up to Scotland. So I applied for a job as a credit controller up in Aberdeen. With my experience I'd taken from the finance company, I was fortunate enough to get that role. So flexibility is quite important if you wanted to look at your career path. If you're prepared to move from one end of the country to the other, as I did, and my wife was English, and I dragged her up here as well with my young daughter. So we were prepared to make some sacrifices, but we felt it was the right move professionally and personally for us. So I worked with the company that I moved to for about 3 or 4 years, but unfortunately they went into liquidation. So with 2 young children, a mortgage to pay, I had to look around pretty quickly as to something I wanted to move into. And I saw an advertisement in local government for a junior arrears officer. So I just went for that. And fortunately, I was able to get that job. And again, my experience and the fact that I'd had some management experience in my previous role stood me in good stead. So there was fortunately a little bit of a career path for me when I joined the arrears team. Very quickly, I was able to move up to the next rung of the ladder as an arrears officer. And then after that, within about a year and a half, I then became a senior arrears officer, managing teams of people within that team. And I think looking back, that sort of really gave me the basis that I wanted to stay within local government. There was lots of opportunities. There's lots of different strings to your bow within that. And the last 7 years of my role, I moved across. I took a secondment to do a completely different role as a financial services manager, which had responsibilities for a number of areas of responsibility, and that included accounts payable. I also had insurance, I had travel and subsistence, and members' expenses, all that type of thing. So there was a lot of different areas of work there, which was really, really appealing to me, because you're not just doing one thing all the time, and you had lots of different teams of people that you were managing. So that was probably my happiest time in local government. Developing particularly the accounts payable side of things, where we had to completely transform how we did things, bring a new team of people together. develop their skills, different ways of working, all that type of thing. And then I worked up until 2015 when I took early retirement. And I've been doing little bits and pieces since then, hopefully passing on some of the experiences that I've learned over those years on to new people coming through.
Sure. Let's talk a bit about the sort of the risks and the opportunities and taking a safe path, because it sounds as though you would both advocate, really, if the opportunity comes, maybe just push yourself a little bit. So can we talk about that versus knowing what training you need and thinking, well, I can't apply for this because I haven't got this under my belt. Gary, how do you feel about risk?
I think I mean, you've got to believe in your own abilities and what you want to achieve. And I think there's no harm, maybe if you feel that applying for a job, it's not going, you're maybe not going to, you're not ready for it at that particular time. It's good experience to actually go through an interview process even. That way you can find out some of the skills or the gaps that you might need for the future in order to apply for a similar sort of position. So you can, if you like, you can start working on your own personal development plan out with where you may be working within an organization, or you may not even be working. You might be a student, for example, leaving university. It's really important to know what you need to be able to move into some of those positions. But then you might be fortunate enough they see something in you and you give you that opportunity to take on the role.
Yeah. Dan, how do you feel about risk and preparation and the benefits of both?
Yeah, I think the risk thing is quite interesting, because I think it means different things to different people in different situations. I think that's the really, really great thing about risk. So, is risk moving sectors? Is risk going to a company within the same sector that may be a little bit more of a startup company that might not be so secure? And I guess the risk is dependent on what you perceive as risk. Anything I've always done, I've got a really supportive family, my parents, and Gary made a point about traveling around the country. That's exactly what I've done as well from my role, always with the knowledge. And my mum will probably prefer this, but not so much my dad. Mum said, if anything happens, Dan, just move in with us. It's fine. So, no matter what happened, and having a supportive network. And that's the same now as I get older with friends. I've got a great partner who's really supportive of me. I live in Birmingham and work in London, and she's really, really supportive. So is it a risk to go to London when you're in a relationship in Birmingham? It might be, if you haven't got the right level of support. So I think the planning side of that, I'll go back to that, having that the end goal in mind. But yeah, risk is very, very personal. I've taken risks and never regretted it. And I think that's the key thing. But I guess, were they risks? I guess that's probably the question. If nothing's gone wrong yet. So. And
you're right. What is risk to you? Because sometimes we just have to earn a living, don't we? And we can't. Yeah. We can't say, well, I can move in with somebody. We have maybe people to support or what have you. So it depends on your personal circumstances.
100%.
Nothing's forever, but maybe look around.
Yeah.
What about putting time scales on things? I will do this for this amount of time, and I need to do this by 2 years' time. I mean, are they ever useful?
I never. Sorry.
Oh no, go on.
I never put time scales on. I think probably early on in my local government career, I didn't want to be stuck at the junior position, so I probably used a time period there to say, well, in 2 years' time, if I'm still here, I've really got to start thinking about what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go. But fortunately, as I said, some doors opened for me and I was able to start getting up the ladder, which was great. But generally, no, I've not really put a time frame on things.
Not rigidly. Dan, what would you say to people thinking about how long should they do something for?
I think there's always the phrase levels of experience and years of experience is always an interesting one for me. So people say I've got 10 years experience in something. I've been doing this job for a long time. I've got 10 years experience. Have you got 10 years, or have you got 10 of the same 1 year experience? Are you just repeating the same thing over and over again? And I think one of my biggest jumps in my career from taking a new opportunity was moving from Asda, where I'd been for 11 years. I was a manager. It was stable. It was a nice job. It was a great area, but repeating the same thing over and over again, just lack of opportunity. And then saying, you know what, this is great. I'm getting more this experience, but I'm doing the same thing and getting better at the same thing. So moving to B&Q, that opportunity I had back in 2014, now it was, That was me getting brand new experience, and the amount I learned in those 2 years of being Q in the retail sector for it was more valuable than the 8 I had before in Asda. So there's a real fine line between are you getting the experience you need, or are you just repeating the same stuff over and over again? And I think if you've got a line manager you're in great conversations with, giving you the new opportunities to go and stretch yourself, I think that's very different from just staying in the same role for a long period of time. So I completely agree with Gary. It's very difficult to put years on it. It's more around what do you want to do within that time frame is more important, because that's real true experience. Not them years are just tenure rather than experience and stuff.
Okay, so the question is having a personal development plan important? But more importantly than that, I would like both of you to go on and say, what might a personal development plan look like? I mean, what are you going to put into that little box of what you need to be thinking about? Is it just look for opportunities, that kind of phrase, if you like, or can there be other things put in there? Dan, maybe you'd like to kick us off. What does a personal development plan look like?
Yeah, personal development plans for me, I had that end goal in mind, but it was around speaking to my line manager. I say really supportive one. It can be particularly, and I use that as an example. So a personal development plan looks like a blend of various different learning opportunities. And the approach we use at Canby is the 70-20-10 model, not as rigid as in 70% of the time, but for those who don't know, what that basically means is 10% of your learning is the formal kind of education piece, probably very relevant in the accounting world and the finance world as well. That 20% of your learning time is learning through other people, learning through mentoring, learning through observing things happening around you. But that 70% of that time is experiential learning. So for me, my personal development plan was all around, I want to be a people partner within a couple of years' time. What are the activities that I can get involved with within the business that will help me get to a place where they would feel comfortable hiring me in that role? Some of that was some education, whether it's e-learning, whether it's a formal qualification, but the majority of it was me working alongside experts within Canby and getting building my skill set that way. So personal development plan is really important, but I don't think it's something you can go, right, over the next 2 years, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things. It is, I need to improve this skill. Let's look for opportunities to be able to do it, and being flexible about what learning means to you as well, because learning comes in various different forms.
Yes, sure. Gary, what do you think a personal development plan might look like?
Yeah, well, I think in my experience, you've got staff working within teams who all want different things. Some are quite happy to just come in and number crunch and put figures in. So their personal development plan is going to look a lot different to what somebody who wants to maybe progress up through the organisation is going to look like. One of the issues I had, I suppose, within local government was the old annual appraisal system. And the way that worked was that it tried to pigeonhole everybody into the same scoring matrices for developing. That could be communication skills, it could be educational learning, it could be ways of working, that type of thing. And that to me was far too rigid. And I think also you're only meeting once a year with your line manager, maybe for an hour. So it didn't really meet the needs for me. So one of the things that we did in our finance section was to actually introduce that more personalized approach and bring in a regular check-in meeting with the line manager, say every 3 months, and work through exactly what it was that person wanted to do within the next sort of 6 months to work towards those things. And that's quality time that you've got with the line manager. So it's really important that those 3 monthly meetings happened and that member of staff felt that they had that time to be able to relate to what they were working through on the personal development plan. And it gives the opportunity then to see where things are going well, things are maybe not going quite so well, and you maybe need to focus on those a little bit between the next meeting. So we really worked hard on bringing in a good personal development plan for the staff that was flexible, and it worked for that particular individual, not for the whole team.
It's a working document as well, Gary, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a static process. You know, I went to university to become a PE teacher, And if I'd have kept that personal development plan, I'd still be unhappy being a teacher if I'd achieved it. And I realized that wasn't right for me in one experience I had working in a school. And yeah, I realized that working kids as a PE teacher wasn't right for me. But that's where you kind of develop and adapt. And then you might change direction, but you can only change direction if you've got one, I think would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Have a plan, and if necessary, use it.
Yes, exactly. And it is a working document. It's continually flowing and changing. And I think, yeah, just continual dialogue, like Gary's saying, that's so important. Not having that static once every year you talk about career development. It's a continual process.
Okay, so let's move to Gary, because I'm going to specifically talk about finance, and then we'll broaden it out with Dan a little bit. In the last few years, there's been an increase in the use of technology to automate some of the more repetitive tasks within finance. So what do you see as the skills of the future for AP and finance in general, Gary? I mean, what will stay, what will change, what will be new skills? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's still going to be a need for some number crunching, as I said earlier, inputting data, because you're always going to have some invoices that are not going to match. They're going to need manual intervention. But if you've got a really good automated process, the volume of those should be reducing quite quickly. Now, the big worry for staff in AP, and I think we've touched this on other webinars that we've had, is what's going to happen to my role, within the team, because there's not going to be the number of invoices to do that type of work. But you then see a change in the way that you work. You can look at how you can interact better with your suppliers, for example. If there's some suppliers who you may be getting some problems with in terms of how they're submitting invoices, or they're not matching correctly, then there's more of an opportunity there for the staff to take on a role of being the contact for the organization and the suppliers to help work towards improving that, and also liaising with other organizations across your workplace to try and improve on that as well. So there's ways that can be improved as well. Sorry, my grandson's just crying in the background there. So hopefully you can't hear it.
Only a little bit.
Yeah, but, okay.
But that's a good skill. That's a television skill. Ignore the noise in the background.
Yeah, I'm not so sorry about that.
No.
Yeah, so there's also there's communication skills that are going to be very, very important. There's also going to be the ways of working in terms of utilizing technology. So your staff have got to be more up to speed with how the technology is going to work within the accounts payable function, for example. So you've got automated invoices coming in that are matching through the system, and your members of staff need to be more sort of au fait with how that operates as well. So there's a lot of different strings to their bow now, rather than just being a solid processing function. Yeah.
And do you think staff members can help by suggesting how their own jobs might change to take in other parts, rather than it being a top-down exercise?
Yeah, no, that's really, really important, because they're the ones that are on the coalface. They see how things are operating each day, particularly if you're bringing in new technology. If things aren't working well, they need to let you know as quickly as possible, so that you can then start to work hard on fixing those issues that might be happening. So yeah, that it's very important to have them involved. And also, if you're bringing in new technology and you've got a working group, for example, make sure you've got the staff at the front line involved in some way or another to help you through the plan.
Yeah, just in the big picture of finance skills, finance departments, is everything moving in the same direction at the same time, or are some companies doing it very differently, needing to do it differently, or just not moving as quickly as others? Is there a general move in any way at all that you've spotted?
There is, well, I think within AP, you've definitely got some organizations that are moving a lot quicker than others. Definitely. And it's just the way of the world, really. Some organizations are maybe a little bit reluctant to move into the new technology. Maybe it's cost, maybe it's manpower, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, even within local government, you've got some that are way ahead of others. But then the important thing is that those that are way ahead should be given that sort of positive feedback on the ways of working to the others, so that they can sort of bring them along with them on the journey, if you like. They've already felt some of the pain points, so you can help them through that by saying, well, maybe don't do it this way, do it that way, for example. And then work with your software providers as well, because they're the ones that have introduced that technology. They know how it integrates with mainframe financial systems, for example. So
And by and large, is training getting better, staying the same? Whatever.
No, training, I mean, that's one of the key things that I was always looking at when we were moving to the new technology, is what type of training were we going to get. On-site training is obviously the most preferred, so you've got somebody provided by the software provider to come in and do that training, and also train up somebody within your own team so that they can then train internally as new people come on board, or you need to review how things are going, and support your staff through all of that. So yeah, I mean, I always found the training that we received from our software providers was very positive and very good. Yeah.
But an important thing to look at.
Yes, absolutely. On one of your check boxes, make sure that training is the type of training that's going to be provided. Yeah.
Dan, let's move more generally and talk. I mean, all sorts of areas are changing. Technologies are moving, and presumably in all sorts of fields, the jobs are getting together. What are you seeing with your learning and development?
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think what we're seeing is a lot of things are getting automated. So whether it's in the betting industry, whether it's, we have the odds compiling process, so how we compile odds in the business. A lot of this is getting automated and getting more getting less of a human interaction with it. So I think from a development perspective, I think Gary alluded to it just then around change management. One of the things that managers and leaders particularly we need more to develop more in is change management. Is, things change at such a rapid pace. We need to make sure that we equip managers with the ability to do that. A lot of the times we find is the learning intervention, or the stock learning you buy off the shelf, the e-learning doesn't keep up with the level of change, and it's very much around relying on your experts to be able to deliver that. Like Gary said, having people in your organization that can deliver training internally, because most of the time things like e-learning for specific niche companies like ours in sports betting, the learning doesn't catch up as quickly as we innovate in our products.
Right. We've got a poll in a moment about future skills. So can we identify, skills that are perhaps ones that people don't have at the moment that they should be looking at developing, or they might be a bit uncertain about them? Are there anything that you would identify as future skills that people need?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a future skill. It's probably a skill that's needed now that will just become more and more evident, is the ability to be able to communicate data in a way that's meaningful to the end user or to a customer or to a partner. Gary mentioned earlier around everything being automated and then pulling out reports that show like sort of the mismatched invoices, being able to understand where that's come from, be able to communicate that data to employees and customers is really, really important. And in fact, in ours, we're looking to utilize our apprenticeship levy. We're talking about apprenticeships. We use our apprenticeship levy for data literacy in some of our key areas across the business. Okay. And I think that is going to be more and more important as we get more automated, as we get more data from these systems. That's going to be super important.
Okay, so they're skills, as it were, for the future. But Gary, how do people identify what I think our poll is really going to be about, saying, what skills have I not got that I will need in the future? How do you go about finding out what you might be missing, Gary? Talking to people?
Definitely talking to people. I think looking at jobs in a similar area of work that you want to be looking at. What's the requirements for it? What's the roles and responsibilities? What does that entail? And then importantly, what's the personal requirements that would be needed to meet the job? I mean, I think it's changed an awful lot from my days, but you're certainly dealing with a lot more companies internationally now. So you could be dealing with companies right across the world. So you've got to be a lot more savvy in terms of how you're dealing with companies that are in Asia, US, for example, where that wasn't such an issue back in my early days. So there is that type of requirement as well. It's a multicultural world now.
Yeah, broad outlook and understanding, really.
Absolutely. You've got diversity and things like that, definitely. So you've got to be really aware of all of that type of things. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's ask people. This is a poll, just a simple one, yes, no, or unsure. Do you have future skills on your personal development plan? Are there things that you look at that you think you need in the future? Do you have future skills on your personal development plan? And it's just a single choice, if anybody wants to tell us what they're thinking. And it might be the same. I mean, as we didn't have any personal development plans, I suspect that people are maybe slightly won't be thinking about putting future skills on it. No, I think we don't have the answers for that one yet. So but it is something that people could be looking at. Oh, 50-50. Unsure or no. So maybe your chat will make people, the discussion will make people think about identifying those future skills they might need that could help them in another job. So let's move on. How can leaders help and encourage their teams to reach their potential and ensure that they are upskilling for the future, whatever that means in whichever industry or department? So Gary, what can leaders do? What should they be looking at first off to make things work?
Well, I think Dan touched on it earlier. I think leaders need to be really, really supportive of the staff, and if they see potential in people, be prepared to help develop them to where they want to get to. And I touched on earlier as well about the need to have regular review meetings with the staff to ensure that where you're wanting them to go, they're on the right road, but it's flexible enough to maybe take a little detour if things aren't going right, and you can work on that type of thing. So I mean, when I first took on the accounts payable team and we went through our whole transformation project, it was quite frightening. There was a lot of staff there that had worked in AP, but in different individual sections. So they were coming together as a completely new team. So I needed to give them the vision of where we wanted to go to, what we wanted to achieve, and how we were going to achieve it. But importantly, the support that they were going to receive through that journey, and the fact that communication was really important as well. So you needed to keep them up to speed and exactly on what was happening, what was going to be affecting the team. And at the start, things were pretty hairy because we were facing huge backlogs of work. You had suppliers that weren't happy, but unfortunately, you're going to have those sort of pain points, and you just needed to make sure that you were leading by example, supporting the staff through it, and making sure that you were using whatever methods you could to get that workload up to date as much as possible. That might have included what it did include for working weekends and overtime. And unfortunately, I had a really good team of staff that did blend very, very well, and they could see where we wanted to go, and the majority of them wanted to achieve that, and that made my job a little bit easier. Plus I had very supportive supervisors as well, and one in particular knew the workings of our automation inside out, so she could pinpoint any problems very, very quickly and get them dealt with, but was also very supportive of the team. And making sure that those supervisors regularly met with the team members to look at how they were developing, but also to get any feedback, good or bad, as to what they thought, some of the issues might be for the team developing the way we were wanting it to.
Okay, Dan, it must be an issue for people that you're trying to get a job done today, now, but you're wanting to encourage teams to reach their potential and upskill for the future. Is there a sensible way of thinking about, time, resources, how that might happen without affecting what's going on day to day that you need to get done now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to touch on what Gary just said there, I think Gary's undersold himself. I just want to acknowledge that, because what Gary's described there around leading a team is leading people on what they needed leading in, and managing situationally and understanding what each individual needs. And that's one of the great things a manager can do, is upskill themselves so they can manage in various different ways for various different situations. So they are a trainer, they're a mentor, they're a coach, they're a delegator, building that trust across the team. I think time frame becomes less of an issue if you've got trust within an organization and trust within a manager-employee relationship that things will happen. I can speak from personal experience where I've had to wait longer with certain managers, but been completely fine about it because I trusted that they had the right intentions in mind. So from a relationship perspective, building trust is really important. Now, When you've got somebody increasing in their skill set and somebody increasing in their autonomy in their existing role, it's important that you recognize when things are becoming a little bit easier for people, so you can add those stretch projects and stretch objectives on. Something that took you an hour 10 years ago is not going to take you an hour today. So how do you fill that time with really meaningful things that not only benefit the individual, but benefit the team and the business and yourself? So when you've got those people getting more autonomous and more skilled in their existing role, they'll have more time to be able to do things in their development plan, be able to do things that that stretch them, and sometimes just are really interesting. So looking for those opportunities is really important. And we think about process improvements, using that time for something around development is always valuable.
Do you still come across leaders at various levels that are not very interested in helping their team and individuals get more skills, or is that a thing of the past?
I think as long as you've got a human interaction at some point, you're going to get a full scale of people that are really interested in developing people and really interested in the output. I think the job for the job for learning development teams, the job for the people partner teams, is making sure that the leaders are well-rounded as possible. And I think it's around feedback to those leaders as well. It can be quite difficult we're talking a senior manager, to give feedback to a manager saying, you're not performing how I'd like you to perform. And then they turn around and go, well, all of my figures and facts say I'm doing okay. Yeah. I've got high churn in my team and people are leaving, but all of the results I'm getting are working. And it's very difficult sometimes to challenge people on their softer skills, because it's not as evident as something around performance or KPIs. So enabling and giving the confidence to senior managers can resolve that. But absolutely, there is kind of there is always a gap between managers who take that more seriously than others.
Gary, in your experience, what's the best way I'm somebody on a team, I know that there are skills I need to develop, I want to get on. Can I do a bit of push from the bottom up in an organization or a team? What should I do to make someone take notice of me and let me learn more?
Well, I think that, that we had one or two options available to us. One of the things we encouraged within the finance department was job shadowing. So you could take on a role and shadow somebody that was maybe in accounts receivables rather than accounts payables, or an accountant, for example. So you get a better idea of the overall picture of how finance was working within the organization. So we did do a lot of that. We also had mentoring as well. I was a mentor for staff in other parts of finance. So you can help through that. And also we haven't touched on the fact that encourage staff to take their recognized qualifications in their field. That will give you a really, really good grounding in terms of the nuts and bolts that you need to do your job. It probably won't give you the experience of doing the job, but it gives you the foundations really that you need through that qualifications to do that. And I encourage my staff to do that as much as possible. And thankfully, those that were wanting to progress did take that on. And you usually find a lot of organizations will help with costs towards that as well. So it's not coming out of your own pocket. And also, but if the organization does pay it and you leave within 2 years, you have to pay it back. So at least you're going to get 2 years out of the staff before they head off. They may head off into the distance. But I think it's really important. I think we might be touching on how you retain talent. I think that's, support them in any way that you can through personal development, qualifications, mentoring, job shadowing. There's a lot of things. And if you seem to be doing a lot of that, then that's a good organization to work for that's really people focused.
Which brings us on, as you mentioned, to our last little section before we go. How do you attract the future talent? In your case, Gary, in finance, but actually generally, how do you attract talent? How do you retain and develop them? So who wants to kick us off on that one? $64,000.
Yeah, it was, local government, it was quite hard to actually, we got a lot of junior accountants and that joining us. And unfortunately, the salaries that local government can pay as opposed to the city and the private sector, it was very, very difficult to retain some of those stuff. And we did all we could, we supported them, as I said earlier. But at the end of the day, if somebody feels that they can go and do a job similar for, double the money, it's very hard to retain them. But there are some people that like that money is not the be all and end all, and they're quite happy to work and develop within the organization that they're in, and they might see a career path as well to maybe be a head of finance or a director of finance, for example. And so I think it's horses for courses, to be honest with you. But if you've got happy staff, it's easier to retain them than unhappy staff.
Dan,
that's probably the obvious comment.
Dan, you mentioned earlier, that someone might say, oh, I'm doing pretty well because this all stacks up, but then in their teams there's a lot of churn. What are your thoughts on how you attract, how you retain and develop staff? I mean, it's obviously worth it, but how do people go about it?
Absolutely, yeah. I think from the attraction point is making sure you've got a wide enough talent pool to choose from. I think if you, particularly in a smaller sector like sort of sports betting, you can just get kind of the same people applying for the jobs. So how do you widen your talent pool to give you more options and make your team more diverse, which obviously has diversity of thought, which then enables teams to be a little bit more interested and a little bit sort of, I guess it creates a bit of excitement when you have a diversity of thought within a team. I think clear expectations on managers of how they need to lead their teams, and clarity around behavioural competencies is really important. And reflecting people's performance evaluations, and we spoke about it earlier, Gary, but reflecting those performance conversations you have with managers in a full 360 view of their management style and how they're leading a team. There's moments in time which you can get information from people, such as engagement surveys, but continual dialogue, not only from line manager to direct reports, but from business to direct reports as well. So the more you can communicate, the more you can understand what people really need from working environment, because it's very individual to that person, the better. And also, if we're thinking of retaining talent, as Gary said, there's a finite number of managerial positions. Outside companies will always be interested in paying more because that's what always happens. But I think having an ability, and you touched on it earlier, Gary, around job shadowing, having the ability to see those sideways moves, to give people opportunities to go work in a different department for six months to a year, doing some job swaps, anything like that keeps people interested and fresh. We absolutely know that helps. There was a study done, I think it was LinkedIn that did the study, and 93%, and I'm worried about the other 7%, but 93% said if they would stay within their, if they invested in their careers, they'd stay with their company longer. And what that translates to is people with internal mobility stay on average around 5.2 years within a company. If they don't have internal mobility, it's just over 2 years.
Right.
So, and that's not about salary, that's not about anything, that is around internal mobility and the ability to do things within your organization. So looking at how different jobs translate to each other, looking at development opportunities and learning interventions you can give people to move into a different team, even if it's for a short period of time. And that is, a lot of that is around managers, going back to that career conversation, having that career conversation, understanding where they want to be in their career. And if it's outside of their team, it's okay. It's absolutely fine, because do you want to keep somebody who doesn't want to be there and will leave anyway, or do you want to keep great talent that might be in a different team that you can work with in the future? So yeah, that career conversation and career mapping is so important to be able to retain people.
Which closes our circle, really. So personal development and the opportunities for it means that people are more likely to stay with you than they were if people just ignore personal development and skills development. Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks to our experts, Dan Allen and Gary Stevens, for their own stories and their views on what's going on. Thanks to you for joining us. And for more information on membership and courses, please take a look at the IFOL website. This webinar will be available on demand on the IFOL website from tomorrow. We'll send top suggestions and a PDF best practice guide. And also, could you please take part in our current finance leadership research study? The aim of the research is to understand what current finance leaders are focusing on and what their strategic priorities are. All respondents who fully complete the survey will be entered into a prize draw to win one of 3 $50 or £50 Amazon gift cards. So please take a look there on the website. Thanks again for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.